That's right. I'm gonna quick pitch you. Bam. Now you say this is Jessica Brandis.
All right.
You're watching the Break It Down show. Go ahead and do it. A quick pitch, Jeff.
Oh yeah. Yep. Okay. I'm Jessica Brand, and you're watching. I'm sorry.
The, the Break It Down show.
And you're watching the Break It Down show. Yeah.
Hell
Sorry.
yeah, we're doing. There's nothing to be sorry about. We're just talking baseball. No harm, no foul. Hey, I'm interested. I had a little mini exchange today. There's a lot of hype, and I love players that get hype, right? But for whatever reason, like if it gets crazy, I'd like to pipe up and be like, hey, Pete Crow Armstrong's awesome. Let's just give the kid a minute to be a kid. Let him figure out. Let him stay up in the majors. We're so desperate for him to be the greatest player or the second greatest player and rate these guys way outside of what they're capable of, what they have done, what they might do, that we tend to miss what's happening today right now. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think that's the problem that we run into every season when it comes to small sample size, right? So we anoint that everyone's going to be the best hitter after like a month or 2 months. And we wind up saying, well, maybe that's not actually the case in reality when we look at something like rate stats that are nowhere near stabilization. And I
Yeah.
think we kind of take away from what we're seeing in that moment to try to say that, oh, the guy's necessarily the best. It's a great stretch. The defense is certainly real. Like in fielding run value, he ranks 25th among major league outfielders since the start of 2018, and he
Yeah.
was a sophomore in 2018. That works because we're counting it up, right? But if we're looking at something like a rate set, like a weighted on base average, I mean, yeah, he has a 365 right now, pretty solid. But maybe we wait for that a little bit. I've never seen
Yeah.
that scene stabilized in under 200 plate appearances. Never.
Yeah. Yeah. And right now, currently, his on base percentage is 307, which is sort of in line with what he has done in the majors and really in the minors. And so maybe he's going to get away with being a low on base player. Maybe he's going to become a better on base player. But no matter what happens, the league will collect him if he stays at 307 and force him to adapt in some way. Maybe he will thrive there. Would be abnormal, but baseball's full of abnormal things. So when I see that on the batting side, like, yes, he can go run and get it. And we're better at ever at seeing what going and getting it is. But still, like we think that some people think Derek Jeter is the worst shortstop of all time, and that's just not true. So we get very hyperbolic with these things.
Right, and that's what happens when I think we talk about extreme ends of play. Like, even if we're analyzing the small sample or even the big sample, like, people like to see the extremes in their sports, right? Because when we watch sports, we're seeing the best of the best do what they do at that given moment. And as much, we see, I think, our judgments psychologically fall into that trap as well. Oh, this guy's great, this guy's terrible. They're all so really great. And for anything to really be known about what we have in players, it takes a lot more than 6 weeks to figure out what that is. We get there for sure, but it doesn't stop the narratives.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and even then, you have like Not Gaddy has this random huge season, right? Some guys just light it up for a year, maintain some luck, or in a good lineup. There's so many factors that go into determining the nature of a player that we struggle to process all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, it depends what we're looking at. If we're looking at RBIs and runs, some counting stats like that, that's benefit from a great lineup, which, PCA has the advantage of. If we look at something like maybe something like batting average, well, batting average balls in play could contribute to that. You look at some of these teams that get really off to a great batting start, but it's because they're in the South and they're more in line with Southern weather that some of these Northern teams haven't been exposed to yet,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah, yeah. It's so true. And then the players themselves, so if you want to talk about a cold start, put Justin Turner in Chicago. Like if you think that that's all he has to offer that team, and granted, he had a great hit last night, super clutch. He is a notorious slow starter. And Chicago is very hard to beat. Ryan Sandberg, was he a bad starter? Was he in Chicago? These things matter a lot more than we allow them for. And the other thing that I want to get into a little bit, I've been having a conversation with some very passionate Braves fans about how, but everybody won in that deal when the Dodgers signed Freddie Freeman. Freddie Freeman won, he got to go home, he got to get paid. The Dodgers won, they got a great guy. The Braves won, they got a guy who's very comparable in terms of performance. He's younger, and if you match up their age numbers, they're even closer still. Like we often rate players out of scope of their range. It would be abnormal. I'm going to shut up here in a second. It would be abnormal for someone to just expect Freddie Freeman to get better once he gets to the Dodgers. Now, maybe that's some lineup protection, that kind of thing. But to say that we don't think that that will happen, or the odds of that happening are longer than Matt Chapman providing a good cover for what Freddie is at less cost at younger age. There's a real balance there. And when we zoom all the way out, we look at the big bell curve of Major League Baseball. Right there, side by side, can't even see a difference between them. Are Olson and Freeman, but we hate that, and we want Freddie, who's yeah, he's better, right? But how much better? And then what's Matt going to be like in 3 years? And then I looked at this, and this is a stat I developed. I call it the rate of war, and I drives people crazy a little bit, but it works. And so when you look at, if you're a starting player, it works. If you're a sub, it doesn't work. But Matt accumulates one WAR for his career every 27 games, about once a month. That's a Hall of Fame rate. Man, maybe he won't be a Hall of Famer, but he's got these indicators that he will be. And so we tend to lose sight of that. Really, at those ends of the bell curve, it's just not much difference in these players. When you zoom in, sure, but if you were to watch them day in, day out, you're not going to pick up the 4 extra hits that he's going to get in 4 weeks. You're just not going to see him because there's so many other things to see. It's just too hard to keep track of.
Yeah, and that's the thing though too. A lot of the Braves fans were used to seeing them as basically their boy and everything like that, and that Olson was the new guy, and they want to have the memories of him, because they won in 21 and him going out on top with him and everything like that. But I think what you're going to miss is that the contracts and the age are not similar. You would have to pay Freeman a lot more into really sunk cost years. Obviously, we're
Right.
not at that point with Freeman yet, which is surprising. But
Right.
that's why they traded for Olson. They realized that they had to move on because the rest of their core was so young, relatively speaking. Because at that point, you look what in Top Boy Stud, you had Acuna, Albies, Riley, everybody like that. That's so young that you want to build around a younger first baseman, and you don't want to have a big contract that clogs everyone.
Yeah,
So it
boy.
makes
If
sense.
if Freeman had any kind of a normal, even a good regression instead of a great one, they would be pissed because they'd be have this gummed up lineup, with this, because all that weighted money. Sure, the team can afford it, but you've got to move these players now. Like a late stage, name any player, Adrian Gonzalez, late stage, wasn't terribly valuable anymore, but the Dodgers found a way to put him to work. There's a lot of guys like that where you get stuck with those later years, and you just want to move those players to another team and pay them to play somewhere else.
No, entirely. And that's partly why you see, like, I think a lot of people don't understand, oh, why is this guy getting paid so much up front for the front years of his deal relative to what basically these thresholds are and so forth. Well, it's
Mm,
because you're wind up being paying them so much more there because they're not worth it on the back end. So essentially what these teams are doing is they're paying a certain dollar amount for wins above replacement. That doesn't mean
right.
necessarily what's going to be on like Fangraphs or Baseball Reference, but what they're using internally to decide that. And that's
Yeah.
kind of why you see the contracts that look very disproportional to what you think at the end. It's not necessarily what they're giving you at the end, but it's what they're giving you at the beginning in combination for that. It's kind of like
Yeah.
a loan for like a car. Like let's say you're paying 20 years for a car. Chances are you're not going to have the car at the end of the 20 years, but what it got you for like the 5, 10 years that you had it, great.
Yeah. Right. I had Rob Nair on the show. We were talking about money and value and all these things. And he and I are both big believers that the competition off the field, the front office competition, for a lack of a better term, but it's way bigger than it's the organizational power. And the Dodgers played this at the elite level. Other teams do too. But if you don't spend money on your front office, if you invest in Freddie Freeman at the wrong time for an organization, you don't realize that $20 million in that year can hire you all this analyst capability so you can see players. I mean, name a time when the Dodgers lost a trade or didn't reap a ton of talent from a trade. Like they just dominate because they see the game better.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think about when I contrast that to what the Rockies were a few years ago, that I remember a picture. I don't remember which picture it was, but he's asking one of the Rockies analytic guys how he can improve like his grip or his swing or something like that. And the analyst tells him that he can't do it because currently he is washing the uniform of the player. That is not good utilization
Ooh.
of your analytics department.
Right.
And that's
Yeah.
just the difference right there in the same division too. You're looking at a
Yeah.
team that's perpetually that probably needs the biggest analytics department because their home field is so vastly different than everybody else, but yet they give the least to it, which is stunning.
Yeah, yeah. The other thing is for whatever reason, the Dodgers are able to, and I'm using them because I think they're the premier organization right now and have been at least elite, if not the premier, for quite some time. They they have a guy named Billy Gasparino who they pried loose from the Padres, and all that guy does is kill it, just dominate, and they managed to keep that guy. If whoever the Cubs wanted to develop a better, everybody needs a better farm system, and Billy Gasparino should just be some GM somewhere who's the GM of development or whatever, and just promote that guy and pay him. I mean, that's what it's going to take, or find your own person who can do that. But the Dodgers' ability to constantly draft and maintain a high farm system while being championship grade nearly every year for the last 10 years, that, I mean, that's the competition you're facing. And so you have to spend money off the field to be able to see these players throughout all these organizations and all these countries. I mean, they take a lot of lottery shots, and sometimes they pay off.
And I think that's the advantage of what they're doing at the major league level, right? Because it trickles down. If you have a successful base, you don't necessarily need like a low ceiling, high floor type of guy. You already have the high ceiling guys. You can afford to swing bigger because you have that foundation in place. Whereas if you're a team that's on the bottom, you probably do need to be a little bit more safe so you can get something that resembles a team and get to build the pieces that way. But the Dodgers, with their financial dollar and how they've built the team, affords them that opportunity. The Royals, I think, were an interesting example to counter this actually when they took Jack
Mm,
Caglione, who I love, by the way, but he was a little bit higher risk than a guy like Fazana that Cleveland took last draft.
yeah. Who do you think develops the most prospects right now? Like over the last, I don't know, like let's say 15 years, which teams have put the most talent on the field? Even if they leave the org, like we found this guy, we developed them, and we hit him on the ass, and they went over to the Reds or wherever it was. Which teams come to mind for you for that?
I'd say Dodgers, as we mentioned, which is obvious,
Sure.
but I'd also say the Cardinals because of how the CBT works, because they're a relatively small market team and they were consistently getting under the old system, consistently comp picks that were in like the 30 to 40 range because of their market size, even though they were successful. So that gave them that same opportunity that the Dodgers had, and they were consistently developing arms from all times. And this has really, really benefited what we've seen for them really this year in particular. I think they were underrated going into the year, and they've borne that out. They're contending with Chicago. But those are the two that really come to mind immediately in terms of what has happened. It's not really the A's anymore. You would have said that a few years ago. But
Right.
those are the two that come to mind. And I don't think Tampa's really been as strong since Friedman left them many years ago. They've done a solid job with finding scrap heap pieces and so forth, but I don't think they've been necessarily as strong as developing guys internally, which is a different question.
Yeah, yeah. That other skill you just talked about, the Braves used to have that. The Cardinals for sure under Jocketty had that where they could always find that arm that was probably used up. And like, no, no, this guy's gonna dominate. And so that recovery of talent and that rediscovery of talent, there's so much of that. And again, I'll use the Dodgers because they're great at this. They'll say, we'll take Tony Watson. It's no problem. Sure, we might lose out on the O'Neill Cruz part of the deal, but what Tony did for the team at the time, or Brandon Moore, or they always have these. Anybody could have had Banda, right? And that guy now comes out of the bullpen, and right now he's had a little bit of a rough stretch, but this guy was a guy put in leverage situations in the World Series, and then he'll leave the Dodgers at some point because he will no longer be useful, and they'll find another replacement for him. But they do this all the time, where they find these recoverable, undiscovered, just throw your slider guys, and then it works for them. For some reason, they're able to do that reliably and repeatedly.
Yeah, so for the Dodgers philosophy organization, Lance Lynn, when he got traded there a few years ago, actually let me on in a big egg about what the Dodgers think, and it's consistent with I've taught and been learned about Dodgers developing of arms. They will say to their pitchers to throw your best pitch or pitches that you feel most comfortable with. So that way, these guys can have psychologically advantage. Hey, I don't have to worry about what the team's telling me. I throw what feels good on that day or what I know feels good on that day, and that way they can develop their strengths. So that way, there's less development to be had, but the development is what the picture chooses to have happen. I know
Mm,
that's not the case in other organizations, and I know that they preach a lot on location more than movement and definitely more than velocity. That's something that Oral Hershiser wrote in his book in 1989. It's been a long-standing Dodger tradition that through the years, throughout all the analytics that I can use today that I can quote to you, they still believe in this core fundamental philosophy of one location, two movement, three velocity. So
yeah.
when you consider that, it really makes sense. You place your pitches where we want, but you get to decide what to throw. And it's like a mutually beneficial relationship that I see all these other organizations having issues with. Because I know Baltimore,
Yeah.
Baltimore is always during during their heyday, they were great at developing guys. But these days, how they develop pitchers is concerning. They specifically restrict the use of fastball to an extent. And that's really, and sometimes a changeup. They've had issues with only focusing on breaking balls and not really making guys feel comfortable. And we've seen that in the results, right? Because a few years ago, we would have said, oh, the Orioles have a glut of really good pitching, like these guys like Dream Kramer that they get in the Manny Machado deal. But these guys have not worked out because they're so restrictive. You contrast that to the Dodgers. I think there's a psychological edge to how these guys are being trained and raised.
They definitely have the ability to be a destination players want to go to. So the word has gotten out about that. They're also, Clayton Kershaw is a very traditional guy, but they've got him convinced to throw certain pitches in certain ways because the numbers indicate that it's going to be good for him. And he's like, they have forced me to believe in them because they keep being right. And so they're also using data to inform how to use that best pitch, or hey, this is your best pitch. Throw this and let's see what happens. And I think I forget who wrote the Andrew McCullough wrote that great Kershaw book about last year, and in there it's like they're like, hey, you got to have a changeup, you got to have a change. So he has a changeup, but he's never really felt comfortable with it, and there's kind of been this ongoing battle. But what they did figure out was that slider is just going to be Hall of Fame grade no matter what he does. If he can get that thing over, he doesn't need a lot with the fastball, and they've given him a very nice back end of his career. If his health had held up, even better. He would still just be an amazing pitcher. Hopefully, he'll be great on Saturday.
Yeah, I hope so too. Like, I mean, it's like so many seasons with the Dodgers. That's like it's gonna be like 18 now because he was in 08. But like the guy is incredible though, right?
Yeah.
Because you look at what he has been willing to adapt to, and that's really what's made him a great pitcher. He's been willing to work with his own stuff for self improvement, but he's been willing to take improvement external of him to really have the numbers impact how he pitches,
Mm-hmm.
which is great because I think you have to have both when you look at players. You have to have the analytics, sure, but you have to make sure everything's mechanically sound because you can
Mm-hmm.
throw everything in the right pitch, but if your windup is entirely different, you're telling your pitches at that point. So that's why
Yeah.
it has to intertwine.
What are your thoughts on the Orioles? What's beguiling them right now?
There, I thought I was very big on them going into the year. I thought they honestly might win the pennant going into the year. They're certainly not playing like it, and my underlying metrics that I use for wins and losses say they are worse than they actually are, and that stems from really not having anyone that you can rely on for pitching. Most of their batters have really been tinkered with to be more pull hitters. Orioles are over jumping into their players who aren't necessarily receptive to it. And these are
Mm-hmm.
young guys who have had success at all different levels that I'm not necessarily sure that they had to immediately tinker with. Now, eventually you do, because as you said, the league's going to adjust to them. But I think they've over adjusted on a lot of their players and not in a way that's been beneficial. They don't have anybody that you can rely upon starting a game, like outside of like who would you really trust right now? Not Charlie Morton. Henderson's going to be better, but Rutschman has taken a step back.
Right.
Everything has gone wrong for them aside from maybe Ryan O'Hearn who platoons. So
Yeah. Yeah. I'm big on what I call the Jacksons, Holiday, Merrill, and Chorio, and because
yeah.
they're all young guys, they all come up, and I would say that Holiday was the most acclaimed as he got to the big leagues, and
Yeah.
he's got the least amount of success. He's sandwiched in between the two of them on age, but these are young dudes, even still. Like I was looking at today, Jackson Merrill is younger than 4 or 5 of the new MLB top 10 prospects.
That's crazy.
It is crazy, right? And he's already playing MVP grade ball from last year. Chorio, same thing. He's the youngest of that group. What is it with and look, I'm a big believer in early starts, and I'm also a big believer in that sometimes a slow burn is what's required for someone like Jackson Holiday. So does he strike you as a slow burn guy? Is he an overhyped guy? It just we need to give him a minute. What are your thoughts on Jackson Holiday?
Yeah, I think you give him a little bit more time because what I saw that there was a story about a week ago where Matt, his father, was going in and he was talking about, well, the Orioles kind of messed up your swing. Well, what a surprise that is to hear. But and then
Right.
he started hitting since then. So I think he just needed a mechanical tweak, and we're not going to see it right away within just like the rate numbers because we have a month of data to wipe out and it's mid-May. So we'll
Sure.
probably wonder where did this come from in July, and then it'll start to look a little bit better. So I think we do have to wait it out a little bit with him, but because he has made a material change to his favor and one that's worked for him and made him feel comfortable. I know it sounds weird to talk about comfortable, but I think psychology of baseball players, especially young ones, is
Mm.
really important.
Yeah, yeah, that confidence. I mean, there's so many stories like that. There's Felipe Alou telling Pedro Martinez, who had been kind of passed around by the Dodgers. They couldn't figure him out. And he goes up and goes, "You're my number one guy. You're a highly touted prospect. You don't know this, And like he's like, I am, and he like puffed his chest out, And he's like, on the day that you pitch for me, yeah, you're the fourth pitcher. But on the day you pitch, you're my number one guy. There's no one in the world better, and no one I want on the mound more than you. And he just believed him, and it unlocked a monster. And then, yeah, Freddie Freeman's dad is his batting. There's all kinds of guys who are like, hey, I know you're swinging better than anybody, and they bring their dad in. There's a lot of that confidence. If you believe that you're great, you can't be arrogant, right? You got to balance everything in baseball. But
Right.
yeah, it's true about Holiday, and we may not see the benefit of that change because it might take a while, right? You're right about that.
No, exactly. Considering when it happened too, and that's the thing though, right? Like a lot of these guys, they might not realize that they're great because they're probably being told by coaches when they're not performing well that you got to do this, you got to do that. And I think sometimes, especially with, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but the way the current generation of athletes works is very different in how you coach them than even the generation before them. I think a lot of times they need more positive encouragement that they are doing well because they do try to avoid the headlines. That's true among athletes no matter when,
Right.
but, like, they do need to hear that they're actually doing some things right and that they're believed in really on some level. I know some people don't
Mhm.
like that, but I mean, if it works for athletes, why does it bother anybody? You want results no matter what, no matter how old or young you are.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. And we're going to talk about Pete's baseball skills right now. Wasn't any kind of great baseball player, but I was pretty good. I could do things. If you want to play rec softball, I'd be a good add to your team. But who cares about that, right? But the thing I'm trying to say about this is the guy that played on varsity in my hometown, we were playing softball together. He's like, Pete, you're a good outfielder. I'd never heard that. No one had ever said, Pete, you get great jumps on balls. You can snatch catch all the different styles. I would do a Barry, I would do a Rick, I would do that kind of. He's like, you can't. That's not easy to do. You hit the best fungos, and I believed him. And so I don't know if I got any better, but that confidence that he gave me was wonderful to hear someone say, "You go back great on a ball," because I'd worked my heart out trying to get good, and going back on a ball. If it worked for me, certainly at the major league level, if someone pays you a compliment, the first one you've had in 5 years, you can be like, "Really? I didn't know that I was that good." I totally believe what you're saying about the attitude thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I mean we have sleep doctors, we have team psychologists, we have all these elements now that are
Yeah.
prioritized within the game, but they never get reported on because they're not necessarily the most digestible stories about how many human elements
Mm.
make up a batter because we all hear about stats because you can report during stats, but you can't really necessarily report, oh, the Jackson's Holiday's therapy session went well because that'd be kind of awkward on TV, right?
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, Ron Jackson's former sports writer himself says Houston, and he's right about that. Houston has developed a lot of talent and done a great job with the numbers game. They're in a bit of a downtime, but they'll fix that. What teams, what players interest you? Obviously, we talked about the Dodgers at length, so let's not talk about them. But what players interest you? What teams interest you right now?
Honestly, like I think what's surprising to me is really how much the Mariners have been an offensive force. That's the one that really sticks out for me. Aside from Williamson, this is a team that basically had an OPS that was around 750 all of last year, and now all but one of them, Williamson, has mentioned, have an OPS over 100. This is just an incredible turnaround that really doesn't make much sense given. I mean, I like the Polanco addition that they made. Houston's a good call, by the way, but like Mariners, what they've done have been completely out of nowhere, and their pitching is only going to get better because they're going to get Kirby back soon. This is a team that's a real contender, and I don't think that's getting enough national love for not only what they are in terms of arms, but in
Mm,
terms of really what I think they can be going forward. They have a lights out bullpen too. I mean, Munoz at the back there is incredible, let alone the other pieces. It is a loaded team that does everything right. And so with Detroit too, these
yeah.
smaller market teams that are just doing everything right, and to me playing sustainably on top of that. Because some of these teams that do well, sometimes I think they're getting lucky. These two aren't and are just loaded everywhere on the field.
Man, I was watching Detroit. I think I picked them. I can't remember because I don't pay that much attention, but I think I picked them to win the AL Central. We'll see how it goes because the Twins are apparently going to be very good, and obviously the Indians are good. I'm sorry, the Guardians are good, but it's yeah, that's an excellent division to follow, and there's a lot of talent there. That's just, it's not all of it's woken up because again, Detroit's cold, Cleveland's cold, and and it'll be interesting to see how that happens. Seattle is loaded. It's interesting when I think about Seattle. I talk to a lot of the angry Ace fans, and whether they like it or not, like I like those folks. They're still good folks. They're upset, and I get to be upset about this, but you don't necessarily have to spend a lot of money to build a competitive team. Seattle isn't known for signing big free agents. Matter of fact, they traded away a lot of talent.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to look at how they. When I think about like the successful Seattle free agents, I can't name one. They've had some Japanese guys come in, so we'll count that. But Cano didn't work out. There's a whole bunch of people they acquired, and it didn't work out. They won a World Series, but that's hard to do. But they reliably put a pretty good product on the field. When you look over 25 years, like they've done a lot of things to be competitive without breaking the bank on free agents. But maybe I'm wrong about that.
No, no, I don't think they really have. They've usually stood around middle of the pack because Nintendo doesn't really care to spend all too much on them, right? Because
Right.
Nintendo operates kind of like how Rogers does with the Blue Jays. They'll spend a marginal amount, and sometimes they'll go out and bring in their own guys back or anything like that, but it's never any big flashes. Like their big signing last offseason was Jorge Polanco. Jorge Polanco is what, like was a very small deal, right? It was like I believe it was like 7 million or something like that. It was not
Right.
big, but
Yeah.
he's definitely exceeded it. But that's an example of what they do because the rotation is all home developed, aside from Castillo, who they traded their own guys for, right? Like the Novel Marte, for instance. But their bullpen is basically all homegrown: Munoz, Bizardo, uh, Snyder, Thornton, stuff like that. But like all of their like Rowdy Telez is maybe not homegrown, but like none of these guys are on big contracts. The guys they try to
Right.
get that are bigger names like a Rosarena always come up in trades, if you notice, because
Right.
the other team dictates the contract. And if they trade for a guy, you'll notice that it's usually a reduced market deal from a team like Tampa or someone like that. So that way they can operate and they can get the name at a better price. They might pay a little bit more in prospects that way, but they do it to stay within financial constraints, to your point.
Yeah. And a little correction: John Stanton owns the Mariners now, which
Oh,
I
thanks.
cannot
Yeah.
seem to remember either.
No, that's
It's been
crazy.
basically
Thanks for the correction. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been basically 10 years. And I am always like, doesn't Nintendo own them? Because it seemed like such a great thing back then, Japanese company buying a team that has Japanese side player Ichiro and everything. But they for sure do that. And I think their philosophy, and maybe similar to the Royals, is just to have a really high floor on their team so that you're just going to have to beat everybody in the lineup. Maybe there's not a world beater in there, or there's only one that's a high ceiling guy, but they're just a very tough team to beat. And in their years when they're up, yeah, they're competitive. And I think Jerry DePoto does a pretty good job. I imagine he doesn't have a lot of money to spend. That's the thing, is like we're really tough on these owners, but they're running a business, and that business has to make money. And all of these businessmen, Stan for sure is one of them. He's not going to say, let's lose a bunch of money this year, every year. He might say, let's go for it and give the approval. But we get really bossy about how other people should spend their money.
Right, and sometimes it doesn't make a lot of sense, and especially these days, I will say, from a business perspective, it doesn't make sense to spend as much as you used to, because if you're having this many more teams in, then you can get in with fewer wins, and if you can get in with fewer wins, and you still have the same chance to win the title, maybe a little bit reduced because you have to play a wild card series. There's not as much incentive to really spend on guys because that threshold to entry is that much lower, and it doesn't
Mm.
make business sense as well.
That brings us into that salary cap, salary floor conversation. Pete would say, how about a salary requirement for the front office so that you can see people? But what are your thoughts on controlling the money and how it's spent?
Yeah, I've never liked like having upper limits because if teams are going to spend a lot of times free agents are not you're not going to get the prime of a guy sort of Juan Soto who's going to get that exorbitant contract from the Mets. But like if teams want to spend, I would let them spend. I wouldn't necessarily put restrictions on it or anything like that. It's
Mm.
not basketball where you're getting guys in your prime or it's football where you have to have more of a complete team. Baseball is not a team that really needs constraints like that because of the individual value of its best players, let alone its middle class of free agents.
Yeah. Yeah. And really, a giant contract is handcuffs for a team at some point.
Exactly.
However great Soto is going to be, at some point, he's going to be hard on that roster, and they try to offset that by, hey, let's pay you over 40 years now and all that kind of thing, because that becomes a little more financially manageable. But that player is taking up important salary. in terms of the spending that they're allowed to do. I'm super bullish on Soto, the player, and I'm positive the New York Mets can afford them. But New York's got a history of signing big contracts and having it not work out. Making bad decisions are bad decisions. If you pay more for those bad decisions, now it's an expensive bad decision. And I think the Mets used to be the Phillies were a good example of that, where they took a lot of bets and they didn't pay off. And when they don't, man, it stands out.
Yeah, that is kind of the concern. I love Juan Soto, the player. He's one of my favorites to watch currently, but there has to be some risk of downside to that to the team as it is, because a bad basketball contract doesn't really exist anymore with how much those TV deals are growing. Hockey, you sometimes will see it, but it's not as much,
Mm,
and that's a sport that's not experienced as much growth. So you kind of have to cap it because of the media relations with the partners, and the NFL keeps on growing with the cap too because that freight train has no stops. Baseball has its
right.
built-in contract penalties with aging curves skewing younger and younger relative to service time, relative to free agency, that I don't believe you need to put an upper cap on that. Now, floor, yeah, sure, because I think a lot of these teams are just pocketing a lot of what they're getting from media revenue and not remotely investing it in the team. I realize you have to make money, but like if you're a team like the Pirates, I think you can afford to spend a little bit more. Bob
Yeah.
Nutting
Yeah.
needs to do more for that team with what he gets in return.
It's tough, right? Because we want to spend someone else's money, and
You
they're like, this is a business. But yeah, like, so we say, like, hey, spend that revenue share money. Okay, it's what is it going to be? Is it $100 million a year? No. So you sign a contract, you do what you can with that, because they can't take on a Soto size risk because that money is not there for that. And so it's very difficult to understand what we need to do to help a Pirates team out to incentivize that. And if it's a floor, great, but if the floor is too expensive for the Pirates, then what do? You have to take from the Yankees and the Dodgers and the Phillies to cover that? I don't know. I don't think the owners want to do that either.
No, it's tough. I think what you do potentially with some of these teams is like you would have it be like an inverse competitive balance. So if you
Mm,
spend above a certain amount and your competitive and your market size is below X, I'm not sure what you would use for X. It could be like a revenue, a media deal, or whatever like that. You would have it be like that, and then you get like a compensation pick that way. So you know how they have the incentives for rookie of the year and everything like that. If you keep them on the roster the full year, as opposed to like banking
yeah,
the extra year of service time, something like that, but for spending essentially.
yeah.
And that way the
What,
teams can young control talent too.
yeah. What if there was a constant player draft where the bottom five teams, you couldn't stay down there for, I don't know what you do. I'm just going to make up some stuff that doesn't fucking work. But like if they could constantly do a high end team draft. So the Dodgers are obviously hyper loaded. They've got I was writing about this last night. They for sure will field at least 40 arms. Everybody's kind of like, oh my God, they got so many guys. They've had so many guys with arms that are Emmett Sheehan has been out over a year. River Ryan's going to be out over. These guys they always do this, but they can manage to run a 60 player um, roster. Really, is what happens, even though they're well beyond the 40, because they got all these guys who are injured and they're great at moving guys. Like they just took Sasaki off, and here comes Kershaw, right? So they do this. So maybe there's some kind of mechanism where the roster size or the amount of players on the disabled list, or sorry, the injured list, maybe that triggers a draft at the end of the season, and your organization, kind of like a Rule 5, but for the Major League roster.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I'm trying to think of how you would incorporate that. Like guys who have pitched below X amount of games or innings,
Sure.
depending on a starter reliever, and then X amount of plate appearances for batters. So that way, and have X amount of service years. Because theoretically, if a guy came up end of the year, couldn't be punished for that. But like, there's certainly ways to have guys who are being underutilized in this regard, and that's kind of how I believe the Rule 5 draft came to be about, because you had all these bonus. I mean, or at
Right.
least how it became modern use, because it's existed long before this. But when you had all the
Yeah.
bonus babies and you had guys like Clemente not being used by the Dodgers, for instance,
Right.
historically.
Yeah. 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 It'd be interesting to see, like, if you could protect, I don't know, let's say 3 players or 4, whatever that number is. It can't be too many because you need it to hurt. And then no shit, the Dodgers pay that guy for you. They're like, yeah, yeah, you can take Freddie Freeman. Fuck. What are we gonna do? And we got to pay for him. Fuck. I guess we shouldn't have 60 players on our roster or whatever, right? And and I'm sure that would blow up my face. And I get it from everybody. It's a terrible idea, but we're just playing with ideas here. So what I'm going to make you commissioner. What are you going to do? It didn't have to be floor or salary related either. Like, what would you want to improve about the game today?
I would try to automate more actions. I would try to make more things reviewable. I try to have there be less questioning within the game itself.
Mm,
I think and what I would try to do as well is I try to have the courtesy runner move to like starting in the 12th. I would give the 10th and the 11th free bases without courtesy runner. Nothing against that rule, but I don't think you necessarily need it immediately. I understand the
no,
need to actually make sure games aren't going on forever, but I don't think we need that immediately. I'd also like to see really a little bit more strict callings on guys not being called on shifts. I know that sounds weird, but like a lot of times these guys are just teetering on past the infield dirt and it
sure.
never gets called. And they made a rule specifically this year where it's not even you take a ball or a result of the pitch. Now it's a base or the result of the pitch this year, which a lot of
Mm,
people don't know about. But like that should be actually considered. I
yeah,
also am a little bit concerned about what's going on with velocity and pitching labs. I love the work that's done right now within all these companies. But when we look at guys like Glasnow, who's injured all the time anyway, but
yeah,
because his frame and because he can't get a solid grip on the ball, I wonder about how much we're working these guys. And there's no easy solution to that either because
yeah,
these teams realize they can replace these guys, but at the same time, these guys need to given a chance to pitch and be able to stay healthy.
yeah,
For a lot of them aren't going to stick up and get like tens of millions. A lot of these guys are just going to flame out immediately because we're
right.
pushing so much on breaking pitches because we've moved away from the fastball, but we've moved so heavily to breaking ball pitches, and I think that's just tougher on arms.
Yeah. Boy. Okay. So I don't mind replay. I was at spring training games and I saw the balls and strike challenge thing. I saw that work pretty good. If we're going to have more, here's what I'd like to see. No pre-review. If you think that there's a problem on the field, you call it right then. And then MLB has, oh, I don't know, 30 seconds, maybe with one extension granted. And otherwise, the call on the field reverts. I don't want to spend 5 minutes watching them trying to decide what happened. I don't want to do what happened to football, where they're like zooming in on the nose of the football so that within a million, something that somebody can never see. So live with the call on the field. If you want to change it, throw the flag and say, we think that's bullshit. Wrong call. Okay, review it. And I'm saying 30 seconds. Is it a minute? I don't know. But chop, chop, let's get to it. Like you can already be reviewing that play instantly. Oh, that's a close play. You're at the MLB headquarter super lab. You just start pushing the button and start watching and spinning the cameras around and figuring out what it is and have a fucking answer right away because I don't want to watch all of that nonsense drag of the game down. I don't want that. And I want I want you robots when it makes sense, but I don't want a bunch of them. So if balls and strikes are there to help, I kind of okay, great. But I don't know, man. And we've got to find ways to get pitchers healthier. When so the big thing about the Dodgers this past spring was like they got six aces. I'm like, I don't think they have one, not even one. And I put the over under for all of the guys: May, Kershaw, Glasnow, Snell, Sasaki, Yamamoto. I'm like, hey, Gonsolin. The over under for me was 700 innings for all of them. And right now, like I'm looking good. I should have set the over under like 600
Yeah.
because it's just not possible. And those aren't aces. If you can't be the guy on the mound stopping all the time throughout the season and then going to playoffs, that to me is an ace. I don't care how many people you strike out or how much limited contact, which I think is one of the things. I understand that BABIP matters, and so if you strike a guy out, you don't have to worry about chance with the ball getting into play. But dudes also deserve to have a career, and I'm not comfortable, and I like it less and less when I see these guys wrecking their arms. Okay, I said a lot there. I'll shut up now. Your turn.
No, I think you see this very interestingly in Japan, right? Because they'll focus a lot on location, but they won't necessarily focus on necessarily how much the pitch breaks. If it does, that's a bonus. But they care about so much more about location that a lot of teams aren't accustomed to necessarily hitting that as well. And their guys go on a lot longer. Like Sagano
Right.
in Baltimore, one of their very rare upsides is a guy who I think from his profile and the way he pitches, he might appear a little bit lucky if you're only looking at like Fangraphs or anything like that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if you look at how he actually pitches with location, how basically he's able to get pitches over, he might be able to
Mm,
prove an exception to the rule because he's so different. And that's
yeah.
something that I wish we would look a little bit at. I've
Yeah.
consistently thought the way the Japanese teach strike strike pitching for relievers and being able to focus on necessarily location of anything else would be a very adaptable US model in terms of really keeping guys healthier and really keeping guys ultimately being able to be effective too. And that's the funny thing too. It's not even a new
Mm,
phenomenon. It's been that way for the past, like what, 25, 30 years since
yeah.
the Mariners have had like all these guys come over for like relievers and so forth. Like I don't understand why you wouldn't necessarily want to focus on location so much. Yeah, but I mean, I realized
Yeah.
I did a chart on WOBA versus each pitch velocity over the
Yeah.
last this year, but like these guys necessarily are going to be able to hit location. I know I'm redundant when
Mhm.
I'm saying that, but you have to think of something that's not velocity or break here when consistently having this many injuries. And you don't see
Yeah.
Japanese guys get hurt a whole lot, to their credit. Like,
Yeah. So this is going to get a little inside baseball as we talk inside baseball. So I guess folks can take it. But there's a lot of great academic work going on in the baseball world. One of the things I say quite a lot, and it's not me, it's just I'm aping what someone else has written. But if you get your second Tommy John, like Otani, he's on his third elbow, right? There's just numbers and it doesn't work. It doesn't hold up. And so we can have all these aspirations. I want Otani to stay healthy and be like Tommy John, but after his second, I want it to happen, but it's not going to. He's going to tear his elbow apart. His last one lasted 75 starts, and those last few starts weren't any. So really, about 71 starts he got out of the last elbow. Is he going to get more out of his third? No. But there's also things with there's a I can't remember the study, but this guy looked. He's a baseball player. He looked at the position and the energy. He used like there's a guy named John Boyd in the Air Force military world, and he kind of looked at energy with fighter jets. He kind of took the same approach to managing the strike zone, and just like this is a pattern that you can throw, and it's very hard for pitchers or for hitters to respond to it. So not just location, but location with design, and so more of a strategic approach to like this is how we're going to approach this batter, and in this pattern, and it's going to be hard for them to adapt to that. But if that stuff isn't being researched, and I don't know what major league teams do in terms of looking through the academic baseball papers, but I can see a program for sure where like you have like let's say AI, just look at every paper in the last 15 years written on a baseball or a kinesiology type topic and just start spitting possible approaches to strategy and tactics and strength and find out like what the smart folks are saying because they're going out and doing legitimate, at least you hope, they're going out and doing legitimate work.
yeah, and I would think they are. The question is, how many of these front offices are so sure of themselves, right? Because it might not be a whole lot, but some of them, some of them might say,
Yeah.
"Oh, this is how we've always done it," or "Oh, we're winning, we don't want to mess with this," or something like that. And
Right.
sometimes we see teams fall behind like that. But that's where I think these teams with these big front offices, like the Yankees and Dodgers, really stands to succeed because not only can they choose to bring all this capital into their analytics department, but they're constantly bringing new people in and new people
Yeah.
being brought in are going to have their experiences read about what they've read and that's what's made them qualified, so you're going to see I think more of the same effects when you see those take place.
Yeah. Are the Yankees a well-run organization?
Yes and no, right? So they're really good at developing pictures. I don't think they're as great developing batters a lot of the time. You have some exceptions obviously, but like that's not real. Like if you have an outcome like Judge, I don't really think you can, like, to name the biggest example, I don't think you really can credit the Yankees with Judge. No matter who would have drafted him, he would have been a tremendous player. But
Right.
outside of Judge, who do you really trust that they have developed recently? I mean, Austin Wells is a work in progress for them right now.
Yeah.
But who else? I don't really think
Yeah.
anybody comes to mind.
You gotta go back pretty far. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even then it's workaday players, not wrong with workaday players, guys who go out and play 10 plus years, and are pretty dang good. They've got a couple of those guys, but it is hard. It's hard to find a guy that makes sense. And so where are they spending their money? Are they competitive enough? I don't know. It's tough to say. I was thinking about this concept. How do you because again, I talked to the angry Ace fans. Worst owner in baseball. I don't know that. Like, what? How do you measure that? Carl Pohlad got rich foreclosing farms on Minnesota farmers, and then didn't spend that money on his team. Is he a great owner? I don't know. I have no idea. Yeah, and so also, what's a good fan base, bad fan base? I used to live across the street from Wrigley Field. Let me tell you about a good fan base. Those people are insane. Like how Bears fans, we kind of mock them because they always think they're going to win the Super Bowl. Those same people are Cubs fans. and they are ridiculous. I'm like, they're gonna win. They really mean they're gonna go 162-0. They really believe it. And then you have A's fans who can't keep a bar on the Coliseum property. And I'm from Oakland, so I can say all this. There's a bar on the asphalt that comes all the way around. I think it's across a little gully, but there's like the main transit thing bar. It goes right there. There's a little cage. You can go down the stairs. And there's a bar right there. It's never reliably stayed open. If that bar was in Cleveland, if that bar was in Detroit, it would be packed. It would be a Raider/A's bar, and it's never survived. Right. And so I'm not saying that Oakland A's fans suck. What I'm saying is California's got a lot of options that Detroit doesn't have. So what is a good fan base? What is a good owner? What is a good GM? What are the hallmarks of that? What are bad ones? I don't know. And then sometimes you're just in a bad situation where I remember when the Orioles signed Miguel Tejada, and I was like, man, that's either going to be a great move or an awful move. I don't know which guy they signed. And it turned out they signed a pretty good guy, but they didn't sign the guy that was going to make a difference for them.
Right, he wasn't an MVP type, and it is tough to know what you're going to get in a lot of these cases because people are just going off of what they believe how it's simple to run a team. And you mentioned earlier in the show, right? How spend all the money and do everything like that. Well, it's really not that simple when you look at constraints of not
Yeah.
only necessarily what a team is willing to spend relative to what the net worth is, but really where the team is with timeline. Like a team like the Pirates should, I know I mentioned they should spend a little bit, but I don't think they should spend in excess because they're just going to handicap themselves further in that regard, right? Because they're
Yeah.
nowhere close to really being a contending team at this point.
Yeah. Right. Do you recall what's their center fielder's name? Brian. What's his
Reynolds.
name? Yeah. Remember when they were like, oh, we might lose him. Might have to trade him. Oh, we're going to sign him. And they signed him. And he has been okay. He has not been this world beater guy. And so there, at that time, it was like, this is a big, big problem. But it turns out if they would have let him go and developed somebody else or signed a high floor center fielder for short term, decent money, they would have been just as good off. I mean, like, he hasn't been the guy that we all thought he was going to be. We'll see about O'Neill Cruz, but it seems like he may also be very exciting, but not a franchise bankable player.
He's had a really hot start, although he's been hurt lately, so there is that to say about that. But he has been dynamic with home runs when he's been playing lately. So he's someone I think is going to spread out well. But the real risk with a guy like that is they moved him to the outfield middle of last year out of nowhere, and that's where he's played this year. I think that's a mistake. He throws like he plays like a shortstop still. He's way out of position. He's not natural at it, and that's costing them runs. And it is weird to
Mm,
me that you move a guy from shortstop. I realize center field's a high value position, but like why move a guy off of a high value position where he's already succeeding pretty solidly into an even tougher one? That doesn't seem like a good allocation for a team that's kind of bereft of offensive talent right now. There's really
yeah.
no excuse for that. You're playing Kiner Falefa at shortstop, who's love his glove, but that's not a guy you move your star player off of.
Oh, yeah. Right. And so, yeah, is that a good front office or a bad front office? Because if O'Neill Cruz thrives out there next year, all of a sudden they're a great front office.
yeah. That's the problem with results based thinking. That's why I got into projections and like betting and stuff because like
Yeah.
okay, here's how I evaluate these teams based upon what I project, and then that
Mm,
way it's not necessarily retroactive thinking. It gives me the ability to say, here's what I thought. They exceeded it. They didn't. They hit it, and that way I can say this is how I can evaluate them pre-action and pre-action, which is important, right? Because that way you're
yeah.
not getting the advantage that not even the front offices are going to have. You're making your own projections and you're acting like your
Mm.
own front office at that point.
Yeah, yeah. It's and by the way, I'm looking at Brian Reynolds, and he doesn't even have 6 years of service time yet, right? But he does seem like he might have fallen off a bit of a cliff. We'll have to see how this year goes. Plenty of time to recover that, but he's going from a mid all-star kind of player to right now, below replacement value. If you go on WAR, and again, look, it's early, it's Pittsburgh, give him a time, but that it's crazy how quickly we can give up on a guy who's just not that old. He's just not that old, and maybe he's going to be fine. It's the baby, but 4 years ago he had a 6 WAR, and that's fantastic. That's a guy you do worry about losing, and then he didn't do it again. It's
And
baseball's hard, man. Baseball's hard.
baseball is very hard. It is a game that, unless you're a pitcher, it is designed to fail. If you fail half the time in baseball and you're a hitter, you're without question the best ever.
Yeah, yeah. The other thing is all the teams are competing with you. So if Freeman and Olsen are the two premier first basemen. You got, I think Rizzo was a free agent that year, or maybe it was, I don't know. Anyhow, they had a number of guys who weren't elite, like Olsen and Freeman. You're competing with every team that needs a first baseman. I wouldn't mind taking a shot at those guys. And so you can say, well, you should have signed Otani. Oh, okay, great. We flew him in, we pitched him, we gave him a lot of money, and he picked somebody else. We tend to not allow the other team to be good at what they're doing. It's always like, oh, Kershaw choked. Like, and also the Diamondbacks were great, and he had no shoulder left. Did he choke, or were the Diamondbacks a great team? Were the Astros a great team? These are good teams, and we tend to lose sight of how impossibly great all of the, even the Pirates are. Like the Pirates are going to win. I don't know, 60 games, something like that. That's not bad. They might even make it to 500, and here we are talking shit about them.
Yeah, no, exactly. They're a team that I projected prior to the year around like 75 wins, if my memory serves.
Yeah.
It's tough, right? So that's why we'll almost never use the word choke, because like when we're talking about these playoff teams, like we're talking not only the best of the best to get the majors, but we're talking about elite run organizations that are usually deep in not on how they
Right.
develop on the mound, but usually in the lineup too. Eventually, when you face hard teams, you're invoking more randomness because the teams are
Mm,
so similarly matched. So if we start ascribing narratives to them, I think we're kind of missing really the big picture of really development and what makes the opposing team great. Because I would say, why not celebrate greatness, right? Like
yeah.
assuming there's nothing that's really an all-time blunder, like you look at Fred Merkel or something like that, that is
Right.
unrelated to the greatness, right? If it's not like a one moment thing, but to
Right.
say sustained matters are choking misses, I think, really what the other side has done. And
Yeah.
consistently, that's
Yeah.
been the case with them baseball. It's not football. It's not basketball where consistently the top guys come out on top because of the power and the influence that a star will have. I'm not sure what they're expecting, and maybe that's part of the problem with. I love
Mm,
football. Don't get me wrong, but maybe that's
yeah.
part of the problem with football becoming such a common sport that if we're seeing quarterbacks like Mahomes consistently win, why don't we see that in other sports? Because not all
Yeah.
sports are equal in terms of what one guy can do for you.
Yeah. No, that's good stuff. That's all of that's good stuff. The other thing too about choking, it's like, oh, they've got to be embarrassed. I promise Mookie Betts is not embarrassed. He's doing his best and he's playing peers, and those guys are motherfuckers. I want them to be motherfuckers. I want people doing everything they can to win. And if you lose, you just say, damn it, they were better than us today, or they caught the breaks, or whatever it is. But you don't disparage the other team and act like they're so easily beatable. It doesn't matter. We just saw the A's sucker punch the Dodgers last night. It can happen all the time. And in a short series, oh my God, like all of a
Yeah.
sudden it's like we're sweating. We lost a game.
No, exactly. And things can change so fast, right? Like it can be one pitch. Like, I mean, that's the funny thing, right? And a lot of people look at these to confirm their biases. Oh, Kershaw gave up one home run and they lost 1-0. Oh, Dodgers can't get it done. Kershaw can't get it done. How about the fact that a lineup that the Dodgers was that deep got shut out, basically, right? How about
Yeah.
giving the other team some credit about what
Oh,
actually happened instead of big market team not necessarily doing well? I mean, there can be
yeah.
moments, again, like I said, there can be moments, but like it's a two-way street. It's not that one team always did bad. It's that the other team succeeded more a lot. Granted, it's not always, but the vast majority
Yeah.
of time I find the other team just did something right. Can we not
Yeah.
credit that? Or why
Yeah.
don't we want to think about that? I have never
Yeah.
understood that. That's why my rule has always been stay positive in your stats when I do them. So
Yeah, yeah, no, same. And then, like, also that one player might have that one day where he does that one thing, or maybe, the tiniest little weakest player just owns someone and they come up and they just destroy them, whatever it is. When you're Aaron Judge and you're in the playoffs, the other team is looking at you. And I'm a big believer. I know it's sort of counter theory, but Aaron Judge, Soto, whoever it is, the big player, that person is the protection. There's nobody that can protect Aaron Judge. Not even Soto could protect Aaron Judge. It makes it harder, but Otani is the alpha in that lineup. They are the protection, and so that means that that's the one player you don't want to let beat you in the playoffs. And so we're going to pitch you carefully and let you walk if we have to. Maybe we don't see it on the screen. Maybe there's not four fingers held up, but we're going to fight you in this way and not let you beat us. We're going to make Kike Hernandez beat us, or whatever it is, or we're going to make Dominguez beat us on the Yankees, right? And maybe those guys do, but you take your shot there, not with Judge. And so Judge's numbers in the playoffs can be affected. Barry Bonds wasn't great in the playoffs. but it doesn't mean that they suck. They're having an impact on the rest of the lineup. Vientos has to actually do his job in the Mets and be dangerous because they're not going to let Pete and Juan beat them. They're going to make somebody else do it. They're going to put it on Vientos, and hopefully he comes through. So we lose sight of that too, and the players that have an opportunity to do something. Like I'll look at the Mets are a fun team right now because they have a really high leverage index for a lot of their players because they are avoiding Soto, who's second in the league in walks and for sure will be first as long as he stays healthy at the end of the year. He just walks so much. And why would you face that guy when you don't have to? Make him hit a home run, otherwise get him out of the way and just send him on his way because it doesn't make sense. The opposite of that, then I'm going to shut up and let you talk. The opposite of that is Arise. Just throw that guy strikes because he's going to hit the ball. He's not going to hurt you too bad, but why throw him any more than 2 or 3 pitches? Just get him on base and let him go do whatever he can. My favorite stat about Arise, like I'll say, hey, he sees a lot of pitches. And someone will say, no, he doesn't. And I'm like, yeah, he does. He sees a lot of pitches because he was leading off last year. He's hitting second. He'll see a lot of pitches. And then I like to use Carl Schwarber because he sees a lot of pitches as well. If you take away all of Kyle Schwarber's third strikes, all of a sudden he and Arise see almost the exact same amount of pitches. So do you want Arise to see a bunch of third strikes? Is he seeing a lot of pitches? Yes, but he just doesn't strike out, so he doesn't get that last pitch. He does it with foul balls, and he is a pest. There's all kinds of ways to play this game, and there's all kinds of ways to counter things. We all have to sort it out, and then it always changes at all times because the league is always trying to collect you and bring you back. I'm going to shut up and let you talk.
Yeah, and you wonder sometimes though, right? Because a lot of times these teams are thinking that you have to rely on your star. In the basketball, yes, but again, it goes back to the cross sport. There's only so much that one guy's going to do, right? But you have to be willing to have the other teams, not necessarily their stars, beat you because there's such a focused effort to get that guy out, right? So as you're saying though, you let the Dominguez, you let the Kike Hernandez beat you. You let all these guys get their opportunities because that's just playing the numbers at that point.
Right.
And it's not necessarily because these guys are bad. Like I around here are a lot of Yankee fans, and they were booing when Judge couldn't hit after the year he had 62 home runs, which to me was just astounding. I'm like, what are you doing? Like that's not really fair to him in this small of a sample size when he gave you really what was an otherworldly season on top of everything else.
Right.
I'm like, are we really going to judge 700 plate appearances, or are we going to judge 20? And apparently it's 20 when there's a lot more variance by design because it's noisy data.
Yeah, it is super noisy. I mean, the Giants never were the best team the 3 years they won the World Series in the teens. They just weren't. And it's not talking bad about them. And they also went perfect in all their elimination games in those series. That's impossible to do. They weren't supposed to win, but they did. Does that make Bochy a great manager? Yes. Does it make them a hyper lucky team? Yes. Does it make them world champions? Yes.
Right, and that's the thing. When you have more rounds, you're going to get a bigger sample, sure, but it means that within any given series, and because there's more of them, you're going to see more variance because of that as a result. It's that much harder for a great team to do well. And it goes back to the point we were saying earlier about not necessarily spending as much, right? Because there's that much more variance, there's not really an incentive to spend to an insane amount because it's less likely that you'll see more on your investment.
Right. Yeah, like when the Diamondbacks built their teams that were championship grade, what they really were built for was the playoffs. They were a good team in general, but good luck beating Schilling and Johnson and whoever else pitched after that. Because that's such an unlikely proposition, But still, those guys lost at times. They didn't win everything. There's a lot of ways to do this game.
Right, exactly. It could have easily gone wrong if they don't come back in the bottom of the ninth. Because really, think about who else did they have? They had like Brian Anderson and Robert Ellis. Like, how many people could tell you the 3 and 4 offhand for the Diamondbacks? Not very notable.
That's great that you did. That's wonderful. Yeah, I appreciate all of this in this fun conversation. I was going to say this to you too because I know you cover betting quite a lot. The best team right now wins the World Series less than 1 in 5. And so if someone gave you odds greater than that, would you take that bet? Or would you just think the Dodgers are going to be the best? It's April. I'm going to bet on them to win the World Series. You're not going to get 1 in 5 money. You're just not. It's going to be less than that because it's really hard to win the World Series. Really, really hard. And the year the Dodgers beat the Rays, when was it Marmol that tried to steal home? And it was like that much difference. like not even half an inch. And it could have been a different outcome. They barely beat the Braves. And I'm just using that example because I remember that steal of home. And it was like, this could be everything right here, and
Yeah.
it's so close.
Right, exactly, and especially like that's the point, though, isn't it? Though we're looking at micros of games when these series are tied
Yes.
3-3. That any one little movement, it sounds weird to say, but like any one little movement, and Steel's a great example of this. If you trip even up like by half an inch, that's potentially the difference between safe, out, runner in scoring position,
Yeah.
inning over. And
Yeah.
these all have such wildly different run expected 24 out states. So for
Yeah.
those that don't know, that's when you look at the number of runners on from 0 to 3 and 0, 1, 2 outs, and they all have different run expectancies based upon league averages. And of course, you can
Yeah.
adjust the team for that. But look at the difference that makes just within a sample game and your win probability in that regard. So it's
Yeah.
when we look at
Yeah.
that for betting, but we also look at it from like a fan perspective of like, oh man, that really swung the game. Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
Let alone what it means for the narrative at large.
Yeah. Yes. This is Jessica Brand. Follow her on X, probably the best place. That's where I found, and
Yeah,
and
for
I
sure.
love reading your stuff. It's always insightful. You're great at digging up these. Someone will say, "Hey, here's a really weird question to have," and the next thing you know, you fired it out. I love your work. I love what you're doing. I love your approach to it. That's why I wanted to have you on the show because there's a lot of folks that get down, hyper down on the damn thing they love. Jesus Christ, you guys, enjoy yourselves a little bit.
It's
Enjoy
fun.
every game. Follow Jessica because she's got great stuff, and I know you guys will love it.
Well, thanks, B. I really appreciate being on the Break It Down show. Like, if you, I always say, I am a stats baseball or any sport really DJ. If you play the selection, I will find the tune and I will play it and I'll find the stat. That's what I
I
do these
love
days.
it.
Honestly, I really
Yeah,
appreciate the opportunity. It's been really fun. But please follow me. I'm happy to answer things. It's bringing joy to this game because I enjoy it so much.
yeah,
Bring
and
it back to
also,
you with anything. Seriously, that's my goal.
yeah, absolutely. And it's so true. There are so many of us. Here's the thing: is like the modern media, the current media, I should say. There's always modern media ahead of us, but you've got a lot of people that know a lot about the game, even though I don't know ball. Um, and I'm desperate to be inspired by somebody. And it happens all the time. Nakayeti wrote something the other day about Cliff Johnson, and I was like, I cannot wait for him to do that because once he does, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to tell you more about Cliff Johnson. Who the fuck is Cliff Johnson? Well, he's maybe the best pinch hitter ever. Certainly, what the second most powerful, and was the most powerful until Matt Stairs came along. But all these moments are out there where you can inspire you can inspire Jessica, you can inspire me, you can inspire all kinds of folks who love telling you about baseball. And it's a richer time. You don't have to work for the Boston Globe anymore. That said, it's nice to get a couple of bucks. So if you see Jessica's work, find a way to buy a shirt or whatever it is that she's promoting, or put in a good word for her with
Yeah,
whatever
that's what it is.
franchise or location it is, because people need to understand that whoever it is that you're applying to, whoever it is that you're trying to work for, whoever it is that you're trying to create for, it's great to support that person. Be like, hey, I got your back. Here's a couple of bucks, and you don't have to have a subscription link. You can just go to Jessica's PayPal and say, here's $10. I see you working. Do that. That's wonderful for folks like us to create things. So that's my call to action. Don't wait for Jessica to sell you a shirt. Just send her $10 fucking. Jesus Christ, come on. We can all do that kind of thing. You don't need to qualify on X to be able to be allowed to make money. No, just send her money. How do you like that commercial? God damn it, just send some
I
money.
like that. Yeah. I'm between jobs. I'm trying to get back in because I used to work for MLB Network as a researcher. So, but I'm trying to get back in that field. But right now it's tough for like trying to do like on-air content creation because I love doing that. But like it's always just a passion of mine to bring joy to people. I always say
Yeah,
like I'll bring Sarah Langs, but with direct odds. That's what I try to see myself as. Like,
I love it. All right, anything in closing before we go?
yeah, no, if you give me a follow, give me a DM or anything like that, just please, if you know anywhere that's hiring for research, that's really what I need because that really always helps me a lot. So if you can give me that, but I want to say also, Pete, thank you for the opportunity. I hope you enjoyed me as much as I enjoyed talking with you.
Of
It
course.
was
Yeah,
fantastic. Thank
yeah,
you
yeah,
for
yeah.
this, and I'm gonna
I
get it right
stand.
this time. Thanks for the Break It Down show.
It's all right. You're not the first person to botch it, including me. I've botched it on my own damn show. I've done it. So, all right, I'm gonna say goodbye to everybody and come back to say bye to you in a second. Thank you all for watching Break It Down Show. If you're new to us, great. We got all kinds of stuff. I used to be a spy. I talk about spy things all the time. I have all kinds of really big thinkers, but we have authors. We have all kinds of stuff. Whatever it is you like, I'm probably going to hit it. If you got an idea for a guest, send me a DM on X. That's probably the best place. All right. So I will see you all. I guess I might take off tomorrow. We'll see how that goes, but for sure on Friday. So I'm going to see you all then. And thank you all so much. Hang in there for a second, Justin.